How to use progressive overload for maximum growth. After spending years studying exercise, I still see this topic being misexplained. If you've been going to the gym consistently and you haven't been seeing the results that you want, or you hit a plateau, there's something that you must be missing. So in this video, I'm going to teach you exactly how to use progressive overload to maximize your gains. Because I'm on a mission to help 1,000 people reach their goal physique completely for free by teaching them the right way to make progress. Let's start with what is progressive overload. Progressive overload is simply just the ability to add weight or reps under the same conditions. And it allows us to see if we're actually making progress in building muscle. Because if you're building new muscle, there is going to be an associated increase in strength. This is because a muscle's function is to produce force. So if you are going to be adding new contractile proteins, there should be strength associated with it. Which means that if you're making gains, then you should be able to increase the reps or weights under the same conditions because you have had the adaptation of muscle growth. Now, the thing is, that key part that I just mentioned is oftentimes what gets missed the most, and that is keeping the same conditions. Because when you switch the conditions, you lose the ability to actually tell if you were able to progressively overload when you added that weight or rep. The change in conditions could have been the thing that allowed for that increase, so we don't really know if progressive overload actually happened. So we want to get real clear on what these conditions are. These conditions would be the range of motion. Are you using the same exact range of motion that you used last session to this session? Exercises. Are you not only doing the same exercises, but are you doing them in the same order? Sets. Are you doing the same amount of sets as last session? And rest periods. Are you taking a similar amount of rest time in between sets like your last session? All of these should be equalized or kept the same to make sure that you are actually progressively overloading. Well, now that we know what it is, we also should cover what it's not, because there is a lot of misconceptions surrounding progressive overload. There are things that people think are progressive overload, but actually aren't. And this could make it really hard for you to see progress in the gym because you're following the advice of what somebody told you would help you make more gains in the gym, but you just end up hitting a plateau or gains start to slow down a lot because you're not actually doing what you need to grow. So let's go ahead and cover what progressive overload is not. Adding more sets to a workout is not progressive overload because there are no adaptations that have to occur to be able to do more sets in your workout. The only thing that changes is that you have to spend more time in the gym. So, more sets, not progressive overload. Intensifiers are not progressive overload. All of them including drop sets, myo reps, clusters, rest pause, partials, beyond failure, isometric holds, and much, much more. They're not progressive overload because there are no adaptations that have to happen to be able to do them, right? If you're doing a drop set, you're just doing a weight until you can't do it anymore, and then you're dropping the weight to be able to do more reps. Like there's no adaptation that has to happen to allow you to do a drop set or a myo rep. And also, as a side note, these are just really ineffective ways in general to stimulate muscle growth. So there's no real point to do them. Straight sets are typically your best bet when it comes to stimulating muscle growth. So intensifiers are not a way of progressive overloading. Progressive overload is not adding a new complexity in the movement like a new hold or a pause somewhere in the range of motion. It's not adding new exercises that you didn't do before because, right, we're breaking that rule of having the same exercises in the same order. There also is one case where adding weight wouldn't be considered progressive overload. Because as we increase weight, we know that there's going to be some associated decrease in reps. Because as we increase load, obviously it's going to be harder, so there should be a loss of reps associated. So the scenario where it doesn't count as progressive overload is if last week you were able to do 135 pounds by 6 reps, and this week you do 140 pounds by 5 reps. That's not progressive overload because we knew that decrease in reps was going to happen. The scenario in which it doesn't apply is if last week you did 135 pounds by 6 reps and this week you did 140 pounds by 5 reps. Because we know as we increase weight, there is going to be some associated decrease in reps. And since there was, we expected that to happen. It's not progressive overload. But if you were to do 135 by 6 last week, and you did 140 by 6 this week, that does mean that you progressively overloaded because you were able to do the same amount of reps with the increase in weight. Now, why is progressive overload so important? What truly makes it the one thing that you need to maximize your gains? or the key to getting out of that plateau that you've been stuck in for a while? Well, progressive overload allows us to keep the same stimulus for growth from session to session. So that means we don't plateau out or stop making gains because the magnitude of stimulus that we are providing our body stays the same. And the reason that most people stop making gains or hit plateaus is because they stop providing their body with a strong enough stimulus to grow. But what is the actual stimulus that makes us grow, and how does progressive overload keep it the same? Understanding this part is going to be crucial for you to be able to make gains. Because from training, there's only one way to stimulate growth. And once you get that, it makes progressing in the gym a lot easier because you're able to block out all the noise of everybody telling you to do this or that and providing extremely contradictory advice and making fitness overall just seem impossible. So let's go ahead and dive into what is the actual stimulus for growth, which simply is just mechanical tension, and more specifically active mechanical tension, which is just the force your muscles experience when working out. And active mechanical tension can only be experienced on the concentric or shortening portion of the rep. Now, the thing is, not all reps are created equal. There are some reps that are going to produce a high stimulus for growth, and there are other reps that aren't really going to produce any meaningful stimulus for growth. So it's important to know which reps are going to be the ones that actually help us make progress and which reps are going to be the ones that don't really do anything for us. And the thing is, this part is actually super simple. The only reps that are actually stimulating for growth are the last 5 reps of a set. So in lifting terms, that would be a 0 to 4 RIR, or 4 reps before failure and then including actual failure. And the reason for this is because those last 5 reps produce the highest amount of mechanical tension. So those last few reps are the things that actually provides the large enough stimulus to tell your muscles to grow. And this ties in with how progressive overload is able to keep the stimulus the same. Let's say last week you were able to do 135 pounds by 5 reps, and you took the set to complete failure. That would have meant that you got 5 stimulating reps. And let's say this week you did 135 pounds by 5 reps again, but if you would have pushed the set to complete failure, you could have done 7 reps. That means that you would have only gotten 3 stimulating reps, and you would have produced a smaller stimulus to grow than the previous week, even though you did the same amount of work. And it's because since you didn't push as close to failure, you didn't experience as much mechanical tension, which means that you got a smaller stimulus for growth. And that is why progressive overload is so important, because it allows us to keep the stimulus the same. And it's also a measurement that we can use to make sure that we're actually building muscle and making progress. Because again, as we build more muscle, the function of it is to produce force. So we should be more capable of reps and load as we build more muscle. So now that we know what progressive overload is and why it's important, let's get into the actual recommendations of how we should be training to use this to maximize growth. Depending on your training age or how long you've been training, there are going to be different rates that you are going to see progressive overload at. And knowing what rate to expect will be good for setting realistic goals. And when things start to slow down, instead of freaking out and wondering what's going on, you'll know that because you're getting more advanced, there is going to be a change in the rate that you see progressive overload. So let's go ahead and break down realistic rates of progressive overload. If you're a beginner or it's your first 6 to 12 months of training, you should see progressive overload every workout, because this is the time where you are going to be making the most progress and it's going to come the most easily. If you are an intermediate lifter or you're in year 1 through 4 of training, you should be able to progressive overload every other workout to every 3rd workout. Things are going to slow down a little bit here. It doesn't mean that you're not building muscle. The thing is, it just takes more time for the amount of muscle you're building to manifest in an actual ability to increase reps or weight. So it's not that it's not happening, it's just that you're building muscle at a slower rate the more advanced you get. And finally, advanced lifters, people who have been training for 5+ years, you should really only expect to see progressive overload on a select few exercises each month. At this point, you've pretty much made about all the gains that you're gonna make. You're just gonna see very small incremental progress over time. It's gonna be really spread out. But if your goal is to continue making progress, you should still be shooting for progressive overload and getting those extra reps or extra weight wherever you can. But there's more to it than just how often you should be progressively overloading. you also need to know how much training you need to do to actually provide the stimulus for growth. Because doing one set a week won't be enough, but doing too many sets a week can actually be detrimental to how much muscle you build. So landing in the sweet spot is going to be what really helps you maximize your gains. The neat thing is we recently just got a meta-analysis that painted a really clear picture for us what that is. Strength gains plateau off at about 4 sets a week per muscle group. Now, why is this important? Well, when you build muscle, like I've said many times, the actual function of muscle is just to produce force. So if you're no longer gaining strength, then you're also not gaining muscle, because there should be an associated increase in strength with the addition of new muscle. And if you actually look at the meta-analysis, what they show is that, again, strength gains plateau off at 4 sets, but for some reason, hypertrophy just seems to go up and up and up and up the more and more sets you do. And this doesn't make sense, right? Because it's blatantly ignoring the physiology of muscle. How can we add so much more muscle, but not add more strength? It doesn't make sense, right? And you can't just add, 20% more muscle, 30% more muscle, and have a 0% increase in strength. Again, we're just blatantly ignoring how muscle works. So the real reason why it actually shows that hypertrophy continues to go up is because they were measuring the size of the muscle, right? And in these high volume studies, what happens is that there's a lot of muscle damage that happens, and pretty much there's a lot of edema or muscle swelling. And the reason they show that hypertrophy goes up and up and up and up and up, while there is diminishing returns from it, the more sets that you do, the more muscle swelling you experience. They make your muscles bigger because they're swollen, and it doesn't result in any actual increase in muscle mass. It's just that your muscles aren't able to recover properly from all of the volume that you're doing to it. So the realistic number of sets that you should do each week would be anywhere from 4 to 6 sets per muscle group. While they did find strength gains plateaued off at around 4, there is some leeway, and if you want to do a little bit more, that's okay. And 6 sets a week per muscle group is still fairly easy to recover from, but going into those higher volumes is where you start to experience that edema, your muscles get swollen, and you're not really making a whole lot of progress. So what would be the best split to train with to maximize growth? And it's actually pretty simple. There's 2 main splits that we would use. A full body split 3 times a week, doing 1 to 2 sets per session and hitting all of your major muscle groups in that workout, or doing an upper lower twice a week. So 2 upper body days, 2 lower body days, and doing around 2 to 3 sets per session there. Finally, the last question is, how close should we be training to failure? Because as mentioned before, only the last 5 reps produce any meaningful stimulus for growth. And this part is actually pretty simple. For the most part, you'll just want to train at a 1 RIR, or 1 rep before failure. This will get you similar results as if you were training to failure. Not the same, but there is going to be some fatigue that you save yourself, and it'll make it easier to recover from session to session. And if you want to be more optimal about your recovery, I would recommend training in the 4 to 8 rep range, because higher reps do cause a lot more fatigue and muscle damage. So if you want to have the easiest time recovering from session to session, training with lower reps is going to save you quite a bit of fatigue, and it's going to make it a lot easier to recover. And in this video, we briefly touched on the real stimulus for muscle growth. But the thing is, we really didn't give you the full picture of what you need to know about it. So if you're looking to really understand how to actually stimulate muscle growth and the most effective way to go about doing it, then you should check out this video where I teach you everything you need to know about stimulating muscle growth from A to Z. Thanks, and have a great day.